The year is 2022. The trial is Vietnamese women versus history. All right, so for some reason I'm here and you're all here, and we're talking about events that occurred 67 years ago.
Correction, events that began 67 years ago, Your Honor. Vietnamese women have been critical to the warfare in Vietnam from 1957 to 1975. We're here today putting history on trial because it has unjustly erased the contributions of Vietnamese women from the historical record.
Your Honor, if I may. My client is guilty of no such thing. The wars in Vietnam were carefully documented, and we have so much evidence of the way in which the wars negatively impacted the lives of Vietnamese women. They are the true victims here.
Victims? Do you hear this slander, Your Honor? Painting Vietnamese women as victims and only victims is disempowering and disrespectful. Vietnamese women were negatively impacted by the war to some extent, as were all the citizens in Vietnam. However, women's participation in the war had a huge impact on them.
Stand down. I want order on my court. You may now call up your first witness.
Yes, I'd like to call up Ms. Thiong. Ms. Thiong, what is your most notable memory of the warfare in Vietnam? Does anything in particular stand out?
Perhaps one of the most notable memories I have of the war is the American bomber. Yes, it was, let's see, summertime, I think, 1968. I was with my group and we were transporting goods to the soldiers. Food, weapons, all the likes. Then these American aircraft, 3 of them, they saw us. They saw us and started shooting at us. I took one of the guns and I just shot, twice. It landed the second time and one of them went down. And I tied the pilot that fell out of it up. It just needed to be done. Any other woman would have done the same in my position.
Were there many other women in similar circumstances?
Yes, absolutely. We all came from similar backgrounds, well, the Northerners at least. Poor, uneducated, destined to marry off young and live a lifetime of submission to the men around us. War in Vietnam was, to put it nicely, a hell for its women. So we did all the odd jobs that were needed of us, even fighting or, shooting down a plane or 2 when need be. We wanted the foreigners out of our country, but we also wanted to be on, equal footing with the men. The French treated us like our own women, but worse. No education, no respect, but still, we wanted to do something for our country. We hoped it would help us with the oppression that foreigners induced on us.
Thank you, Ms. Thiong. May history remember your bravery.
You may now cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Thiong, you say that there were many other women in your position, but are you being truthful? North Vietnam skewed the numbers of women in its battle troops as a propaganda device. It's not clear on the historical record just how many of you there were. Are you implying that my client should endorse false information?
Objection, Your Honor.
Denied.
Proceed.
Yes. So it is that's what you're implying then.
I have nothing to gain from lying. You can choose to believe my word or not, but to erase the part of thousands upon thousands of women like me played in the war, it's going too far. We just wanted to do the right thing. I think you'd be surprised how many women around us have nothing to lose except dignity and a sense of national pride.
Your truth is very moving, but it's qualitative in nature, lacking accurate quantitative evidence for the historical record. I would like to call up the next witness, Your Honor.
Before we do that, I'd like to call a recess. Order in the court. You may proceed by calling up the next witness.
Miss Sandra C. Taylor, please come to the stand. What do you think about the narrative regarding the wars in Vietnam?
I think it would be an utter travesty if we did talk about the women fighters in Vietnam the same way we talk about the men in the armies. The roles weren't just restricted to this maternal figure. I mean, yes, they kept the country together during the war with their domestic contributions. They really did. They did. They were given these 3 dogmas, almost like an updated parallel to the 3 obediences in traditional Confucian law. As opposed to having to submit to her father, her husband, or her sons, a woman was now given a role of continuing production in the absence of men, running family affairs, and even fighting when necessary, as seen with Neo T. Tong's story. This was huge. They kept the entire country going while the men were on the front lines, sacrificing themselves for the greater nationalist cause. But I think you'll find that their roles were more intricate and delicate than just cooks and nurses and backup fighters. They were in charge of transporting goods because of their favorable reliability as opposed to the men. They were in charge of collecting valuable information and relaying it on to their superiors, like super spies. They did everything. History's treatment of them as just domestic figures doesn't scratch the surface of it, really. It erases all of their accomplishments, and I'd say the war would have tipped heavily in America's favor if it weren't for the contribution of Vietnamese women to the cause.
So you believe that Vietnamese women's involvement was significant enough to battle a global superpower?
Yes, I do.
Well, I'm afraid my client does not agree with you, Ms. Taylor. The extent of the women's involvement is vague and unclear.
Then your client should dedicate more time and resources to studying Vietnamese women's involvement in the wars.
Order in the court. Attorney, you may now cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Don't thank her yet.
Anyway, Ms. Taylor, you believe that the leadership and active involvement of Vietnamese women tipped the war in their favor?
Yes, I do. I believe that. Well, I believe that Ho Chi Minh was correct in his famous quoting advocating for women's rights. Women are half of the Vietnamese population, and this warfare truly was the efforts of entire communities, with everyone playing their part. Without women taking up arms and leadership roles in the Vietnamese military, I believe that the victory of foreign invaders would have been guaranteed.
Thank you, ma'am. Shall we proceed to closing statements, Your Honor?
Yes, we shall proceed. History's attorney may start.
History is innocent. History is usually quite accurate, and it tells a story. When we string together our facts, it is hard to draw conclusions reflecting what my opponent and the other two witnesses claim at all. It would be nice if we could change history based on how we feel, but I'm sorry to say that history does not care about your feelings.
Thank you. Your response, attorney?
Gladly, Your Honor. Both the witnesses we have called up have confirmed that the women of Vietnam were actively involved in and even critical to the warfare in Vietnam. Ms. Thiong's contributions and the contributions of thousands of women like her should not be erased simply because we don't know exactly how many women were soldiers. Yes, North Vietnam likely exaggerated the number of women soldiers for propaganda in order to garner support for the war. However, many foreign powers use the victim narrative of Vietnamese women to do the same thing in order to justify invading Vietnam. Women are strong, women are powerful, and women are warriors. That needs to be engraved on the historical record.
You both have given me a lot to think about. However, I think it's really just a very simple decision. My ruling is that history rewrites Vietnamese women back into the historical narrative, not just as victims, but as warriors and significant contributors.
How dare you! After all the money we paid you to buy our ruling, you did what?
While I appreciated and accepted your generous, non-refundable gifts, I am still going to do what's right. Case dismissed.
This trial demonstrated women's crucial role in the war and how their role was often ignored. Vietnam has a history of female fighters and leaders who have been celebrated, but in the Vietnam War, their hard work both at home and in the war have gone overlooked. Women had so many jobs in the war, such as traditional fighting, liaison work, healthcare work, farming, supplying soldiers with food and clothing, recruiting soldiers, and being propagandists and nurses. They also had important roles outside of the war, like continuing production and keeping up the economy, and running family affairs while others were at war. Ho Chi Minh supported the incorporation of women in the war, and the strive for independence quickly became linked with the strive for gender equality. Through their new positions in the war, society's ideas of gender roles shifted, and what it meant to be a strong, empowering woman was drastically redefined. Our trial intended to rewrite women back into the history of the Vietnam War and to highlight their crucial and impressive participation.